Greetings! Space Ghost Coast to Coast was based around a 1960s animated superhero, Space Ghost, and his former enemies being thrown together to produce a talk show beginning in the 1990s. Coast to Coast was on television, appearing on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim for over 100 episodes from 1994 until 2004.
What's with the action figure?
Okay, alright, look Space Ghost, you've had more than one action figure. I'd even say that These Days You Live On is a cult classic with action figures spanning from 2000 until now. It was only recently that I realized this show was really more for adults than it was for kids. A lot of the jokes went right over my—
Yeah, what's with the action figure?
Space Ghost, you are the action figure. And in fact, just in time for Y2K, ToyCom, with the sculpting help of Art Asylum, developed and released Space Ghost Coast to Coast's first action figure. He came complete with a talk show desk, mug, and cue cards. This figure would have been a plain Space Ghost if ToyCom had their way. Thankfully, Warner Brothers agreed to license the figure only if he came with the talk show accessories. With 14 points of articulation, this figure's head actually moves so he can look forward as he flies. This figure covered the essence of Mr. Thaddeus Ghostal, so much so that it won Toy Fair magazine's Figure of the Year award for 1999. A few months later, a previews exclusive version of Space Ghost would come in a clear form, translucent as ever. The rest of Space Ghost's cast of characters would be left out until Toy Fair 2001. When released, each figure would come with a bonus Coast to Coast accessory. Zorak was packed with his piano, Moltar with his control center, and Brack with extra arms. Space Ghost would be released again around the same time. This time the figure would have laser action, and the packaging would be a little different. These toys are really old, so I couldn't get the laser action to work. Space Spectre would see release with the same Try-Me laser feature as Space Ghost. I couldn't get this one to work either. Though Coast to Coast wouldn't see any new episodes, its spin-off successor, The Brack Show, was making its mark on Adult Swim. So much so that Palisades Toys decided to include Brack's parents in the Adult Swim line of figures for the first and only series. Unfortunately for Adult Swim fans, a Series 2 was planned, and even Space Ghost himself was planned for a later assortment, but Palisades wouldn't survive long enough to see it produced. In 2012, Jazwares would release a line of Hanna-Barbera figures, including characters like the Flintstones and Tom and Jerry. Of course it wouldn't be right to make a Hanna-Barbera assortment without Space Ghost. This one isn't based on Coast to Coast though. It includes Blip from the original television show in the 60s. Like everything else that's been popular over the last 30 years, Space Ghost was immortalized in pop vinyl form in 2016. Funko produced pop vinyls of Space Ghost, Brack, and Zorak. Exclusives were produced with a crystal color scheme. These are pretty much what you'd expect out of pop vinyl figures, not much else to be said. For Mego enthusiasts, Figures Toy Company would release its 8-inch Mego-style figures of Space Ghost with and without Blip. Also a 2-pack with Jace and Jan. The final company to try its hand at Space Ghost was Mezco. In 2017, Mezco's 112 collective would include a 6-inch premium edition of Space Ghost, complete with a seamless cloth costume, making it the definitive and easily the best of all the figures produced. Its price tag today reflects that. I'm not sure what he looks like without the costume, but it's probably something like this.
It's beautiful.
An alternate version, exclusive to Entertainment Earth, would follow, this one with a glow-in-the-dark feature. Mezco's final Space Ghost figure releases were available at Toy Fair 2020. This one's smaller, with 5 points of articulation for the 5 points line. This figure is around 4 inches tall and is done in the vintage toy style, with thin packaging and limited articulation from the figure. For the most loyal of Tag Ghostal enthusiasts, the clear version of Space Ghost was released as well. Surprisingly, Space Ghost, his friends, and his enemies have had toys produced by 6 toy companies. For die-hard Space Ghost collectors, owning just one probably isn't enough. Each company's figures has its pros and cons. I won't make a list. But the ToyCom figures are by far the best for anyone wanting to recreate the magic of Space Ghost Coast to Coast. Man, I still cannot get this thing to work. I wonder if it's, oh shit.